Hey everyone, today we're taking a look at Fans Hobby X-Load, aka Armada Overload, and I'm starting here in robot mode, comparing him to the original Overload here. You can see he's quite a bit bigger, and one of my favorite parts is the posability, so let's start there. Because the original Overload was laughably not posable. You could basically move his arm up and down, rotate a little bit at the bicep, but things got in the way. He had no elbows, he has no knees, he can kind of move his foot forward, about that far. You can kind of move it back about that far. You do get a decent thigh swivel, but yeah, no knees, no elbows, no hands, not even a neck. He can't turn his head left or right. You can kind of look down because of the transformation, but that's about it. So to have a masterpiece scale overload here with as much posability as he has is a childhood dream come true. Let's go over that posability, starting with the head. The head is on a ball joint, so he can kind of swivel around. He can look up that far, down that far, tilt left and right a little bit, spin 360. And while I'm on the head, I'll just point out that we've got some nice light up eyes. If you put a magnet behind him, you get those light up eyes, which are beautiful, a very cool touch. The magnet is unfortunately not included, but if you pop the head out and tap it against some of the pieces here, there's some metal somewhere in here that activates it. Easier to use a magnet though. In terms of the rest of posability, we do get finally some outward shoulders. They go out about that far before these pylons start hitting the head, but even then you can kind of push them in to kind of get some extended range there. You've got a very nice bicep swivel here at the top of the bicep, goes all the way around. Really nice elbow, double jointed to go all the way about that far. You can move the elbow back as well to straighten out. You kind of have a wrist piece because of the transformation with the hands folding away, so that's cool. You can of course lock it into place though once you close that tab behind it a bit. You got a rotating wrist all the way 360. You've got independently articulated fingers, so each finger, which is just crazy. Again, if you told me that I would have an overload with this much posability as a kid, I wouldn't have believed you. Independent thumb and a bend inside of the thumb, so the fully posable hands, the exact same hands as Naval Commander, I think, in super mode. So very posable there. In terms of a waist, you do get a waist swivel. He doesn't go 360, but he goes quite far enough, in my opinion, that far left and right, which is really cool, of course, to have a waist swivel. With the hips, you do want to be careful because of the way the hips are constructed. You can see they use these pieces here that go out, and then there's like a little ratchet and everything for the hips. So I tend to kind of hold this piece in place right here with my right hand while I articulate the hips, which I'll do while I show you. So the hips have a outward movement. They can go straight 90 degrees there. They can go up quite far, and when they move up, this spring-loaded piece here on the shin kind of automatically gets out of the way. They go up about that far. It's not amazing, but again, pretty incredible compared to the original Overload, and the fact that they've got to pack in, you know, the combining and everything like that. It goes back much further than the original Overload. You got a nice knee joint here. Finally, Overload can bend his knees 90 degrees. And of course, you've got a great thigh swivel up there. You also have feet that can bend forward and inward a little bit there. And it rocks at the ankle, at least the front of the foot. So not a true ankle, but a ankle for, you know, displaying that he's twisting his ankle, I guess. So you've got that. Again, I try to hold this piece when I move the thighs out because it feels fragile. And so that's what we've got in terms of posability in the robot mode. Extremely posable, and compared to the other figures, pretty faithful to the original. The only modifications they made really are the proportions around the chest, which I think actually kind of look good. I wouldn't say better immediately, but yeah, kind of better. Like the way this Minicon sticks out in the original has always been a little awkward. I like that they cleaned it up by putting it in a little bit and padding out the things around him. They're very faithful here with their paint, with the blue up here, the gold-plated things around the shoulders, the gold right here on the chest, the gold here. Yeah, very faithful rendition of Overload compared to Optimus and Megatron. The only really big creative liberty they took is giving him treads in vehicle mode instead of wheels, whereas the original has this giant wheel in the arm. He lacks that and has treads, which I'm not sure about. I do like the treads. I especially love that they're real treads. I always love that on a figure. But it seems a little unnecessary. I guess, you know, they'll take whatever artistic license they feel like. Still happy to have him. I still think he's amazing. So the next thing to talk about on robot mode are the shoulder pylons, which I'm going to pull back up here. They can connect to traditional Minicons. So you can see they've got traditional Minicon ports there. Or you can pull up a tab here in the back. I'm going to turn them upside down to kind of try to show you. All right, it took me a second to get it, but basically what I did was I pulled that tab up there, and when you do that, it kind of covers up the traditional Minicon port from the original Armada Minicons and creates a 5mm open peg for you to peg in either, modern Micromasters or the Minicons that are part of the Fans Hobby set so far, or the future Minicons, which use that same connection. So that's cool that they did both things there. And like the original Overload, here's another little creative liberty they took. They included the shoulder missiles that we see here in the original, but instead of opening up like that, they open to the side. So you open there on the side, you get the missiles within, they look nice. I like that they painted them with silver all the same. And then you sort of fold in, you push this cover back along a ridge there so it slides, and then you can kind of just keep it there. Or if you want to, you can spin it all the way around and tuck it behind the back of the shoulder there. So you have these really clean missile pods. I kind of prefer to keep them open and hanging just because it feels a bit more like the original and kind of like the heavy unit from the Armada video game, if you're familiar with that. Kind of has the same design as Overload with shoulder cannons there. Yeah, I kind of like to pop them open and not hide it, but you get to do whatever you want, which is cool. So that's a look at the Fans Hobby X-Load robot mode. I can't say enough kind things about this robot mode. I mean, it doesn't have full posability. You're not going to strike the most dynamic poses in the world, but man, to have any is a real treat after years and years of the brick guy. So they pulled off a combination, they pulled off vehicle mode, they even included the ability to have him tow himself with the Minicon, a fully transformable Minicon. They included everything in the original and also gave us a lot of posability in robot mode, so I'm really happy about that. There's nothing I feel like I can realistically complain about in this robot mode. Okay, up next we'll take a look at the Minicons, and again they have added... Alright, now we'll take a look at the Minicon that comprises of his head. You can see his head back here. Kind of an interesting gimmick from all the way back in Armada. This is the only time a Minicon has been integrated so thoroughly into the robot design that the robot, doesn't make sense without the Minicon. But they carried over that tradition, and again, they gave him more posability than I could have ever imagined as a kid. This is probably the most posable and largest Minicon ever right now. So we've got full knee joints here. We've got pretty full ball joints here at the hip, but they only go out about that far. They can kick all the way forward and backward though. We've got a waist joint that goes pretty far right and left, and if you just bend it back a little bit as it would happen during the transformation, you can kind of get it even further, but it starts to look goofy. So for the purposes of posability, I'd say it can turn about 90 degrees in either direction. We've got a really nice ball joint head here that is even more flexible than the main head, so it can look pretty far up like that, down about that far, tilt left and right a bit, and of course turn left and right. We've got shoulders here that can go outwards just a little bit, again like the leg ball joints. They don't really go out that far. But any posability in this Minicon I just consider bonus, so I'm not mad at any of his limitations. Got it can go 360 the shoulder. It is tight, which is why I'm struggling. It's a tight ball joint. Due to the transformation, you do kind of get a little bit of a butterfly shoulder joint, if you will, if you're okay with popping things out like that. But that's not really posability as much as a quirk of the transformation. And you get full elbows. And by full elbows, I mean about 90 degrees. Like the original, he doesn't really have hands. He has these little things that look like they could be tiny little guns or cannons, which is cool. Again, faithful to the original. However, color-wise, I would say this deviates a lot more from the original. You don't have the cannons here as part of the legs. Instead, they're tucked underneath his feet, which is a little unfortunate, I think. I would have preferred to keep that design cue, but I'm not going to display the Minicon much, so I'm not that worried about it. You also don't get the asymmetry of the chest there, which is a bummer. I feel like I would have liked to see that little asymmetry detail kept there. It's the number of tubes or holes or whatever you want to call it there in the chest. And you also see that asymmetry right there with the two little headlights and this little gadget here on the other side, whereas here they just have symmetrical headlights. So that's a little bit of a nitpick from me. The head is kind of faithful. You get the same sort of crest with the two holes, the same general shape, but the proportions are quite different, so it feels quite different. And then again, on the sides of the arms, because of the transformation, they're not gray, they're red to make it look more like the vehicle should, because here they have a flap to kind of cover the rest of the vehicle and cover the arms, which is red and has the original handle. And then while we're on the back, you can kind of also see that the back looks different because the head on Fans Hobby is just hanging out there. the main head you can see peeking up there, which is whatever. Again, I'm not prioritizing this mode. Here the head is more well hidden, but again, it's just a little creative choice. I don't mind it. I think the Minicon looks great for what it is. I'm already stoked to have the core robot mode. The Minicon is just bonus to me. For a quick size comparison, here he is next to the Legacy Commander Armada Optimus. Naval Commander Armada Optimus is his regular form and his super form. So he towers over the regular forms, but it's a bit shorter than the super mode form, which is exactly how I think he should be. Taking a quick look here at Xload's vehicle mode, it does pretty much everything that I personally want it to do. It rolls very well. You've got the Minicon here up front, able to turn and steer. And when you look at the box, you can see it connects not only to the back of Prime's trailer like the original, but it also can attach directly onto Optimus himself, which is really cool. I'll probably wait to do that until we get Jetfire so I can do the full thing. But yeah, it's a pretty solid vehicle mode. You reveal a couple new Minicon connections here on either side. And like I said, the treads aren't exactly accurate, but they are very satisfying to feel and roll around. The one thing that I will complain about on this vehicle mode, nitpick just a little bit, is that he doesn't have the front cannons here that the original had. So overall, he definitely mimics the shape well enough, but the original did have these big cannons here on the side, and these cannons baked into the body of Overload there. It would have been cool to try to imagine those here, especially since they added that silver detail anyway, and there's a bit of space here. At least you could have added in like separate pieces to tab in, but I'm not complaining too much. Like I said, it does pretty much everything that I wanted the vehicle mode to do, which is mimic the shape of it, be recognizable, and connect to Optimus. And interestingly, he doesn't seem to be that much bigger than the original in his vehicle mode. It's only in the robot mode that he really towers over the original. Okay, and the mold that I feel most people are most excited for, we have his combination here with Naval Commander, aka Armada Optimus, as the huge, enormous shoulder cannons. And this is a huge, heavy figure. I feel like once you feel him in person, it becomes really amazing that they're able to make him stand on his own 2 feet and able to strike dynamic poses like I have him in here right here. So, you know, he's got his feet spread, ankles tilted, the waist joint is turned, and he's still balanced and standing on his own 2 feet. I mean, make no mistake, he becomes a bit top-heavy and harder to balance compared to without it, of course. But yeah, he's still able to balance very well, strike poses, and it's really amazing to have this form represented at this scale, at this weight, and it looks pretty great. Turning him to the side here so you can have a look at the side profile. They definitely stick out a lot, and the back is a little bit, not messy, but indistinct, I would say. Just like the original, there's nothing really here, in my opinion, to talk about in terms of being faithful to the original, except that the cannons do overlook the shoulders very nicely. They have red bullets just like the original, and you can press buttons here to make them pop out and fly quite far. So bam, that just flew across the room. I'll probably never find it. The only thing that is kind of missing for me is the big red sort of pieces that hung over him like in the original. But otherwise, it looks great. You're still able to turn the head a little bit too. You do have to kind of tuck in the ears a bit to be able to give him some room there for the cannons to go over his shoulders, but it's not unforgivable. And like I said, very heavy, very solid, but still able to knock out some dynamic poses. And then here in the hand, of course, we have the Minicon in his third mode, so he becomes the head, the truck, but also a gun. And he kind of just looks like a robot with little guns sticking out of his feet. The head is hidden and the handle comes out of the full robot mode head there at the bottom and slides in using the connection they're using on their Armada MPs. But the ends of the gun does look good, so you can see the end of his feet there. Reveal a couple little cannon holes that look nice. It's a detail that was in the original, so I'm glad they included it. And when you're not looking from up top, it doesn't look so much like a folded robot. So it's nice. I'm glad they included it. It works for me. So that is a quick look at Fans Hobby Xload, aka Armada Overload. In my opinion, this is the most exciting of the trio of Armada figures they've done so far, that being Megatron/Galvatron, Optimus, and now Overload, simply because there is so much room for improvement on the original Overload in his robot mode, and they knocked that out of the park. Now we can finally enjoy that design with some posability and dynamacy. And they managed to do it while keeping intact his vehicle mode, the gimmicks of his vehicle mode, and of course the combined mode, which also looks great. Naval Commander is an absolute beast, even with the new Commander Armada Optimus. I think he's worth having for the Armada collection simply because of how heavy duty he is, how posable he is, giving us a really solid waist joint, ankle rockers, things beyond what you can get from Hasbro, individual articulated fingers, a huge gun, great proportions, light up eyes, and now we've got Overload on top to seal the deal. So I highly recommend all 3 of the Armada Fans Hobby masterpieces so far. and be on the lookout for Toy Dojo for more reviews of these guys and other Transformers.